Hello, and welcome to Snide's Return, a tabletop roleplay podcast. My guest today asks what we coven, which is a tough question to answer in a world filled with discordance. Maybe it's to find our place in a world where choices can be dicey. Who do we befriend? What can we build? What is there to learn? My guest brings not only players and an impressive creative team to the table, but they also bring all the witches. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome game designer, podcaster, and All the Witches project lead, Emma Panada. Emma, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I've listened to a couple other episodes of your podcast and was curious what kind of intro I would get, and that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad it lived up to some sort of hype I didn't realize existed, so I appreciate you coming on and saying that. Emma, getting over my self-sense of congratulatory buzz, how did you get into tabletop role-playing games, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a very nerdy family with two older brothers, and I tended, like many younger siblings do, to follow the interests of my older brothers in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Um, when we moved to Texas at the beginning of high school for me and the end of high school for one of my brothers, he found his way into a group of friends that played 3.5 of Dungeons and Dragons. And they played a lot of times that I wasn't able to join, but over the year I was able to join them like maybe 2 or 3 times and had a blast. They were very much just a fun joke around, hang out kind of group.
Hmm.
And then my brother graduated. I didn't really get to play after that. And then in college, um, our school had a subreddit, and this person who was an incoming freshman was like, "Hey, I've grown up playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'd really like to keep doing that now that I'm at college.
Hmm.
Is anybody interested in playing?" And so I was in, and one other person joined, and from there, it's a terrible story of gaming addiction and spending way too much money on dice.
It gets you early, and it gets you hard.
It does, it
Does
does.
this hobby? Careful how I phrase that sentence. So, from these humble beginnings, college, the subreddit, the groups with the siblings and things like that. Where did your TTRPG journey take you next?
Yeah, so I played Dungeons and Dragons throughout college. At the time, 5th edition was just starting to get play tested. It was called D&D Next at the time.
Hmm.
And but our GM had grown up playing 2nd edition, so I played that all throughout college. And then towards the end, we started playing a couple other systems. We tried Stars Without Number and I think Pathfinder at one point. But after I graduated and moved away from my college town, um, I stopped playing for a couple years until some old friends of mine started watching Critical Role, and they really wanted to try Dungeons and Dragons, and they knew I played a lot, and they asked if I could run for them. And so I did, and we did like an online group that still kind of exists to that day, except we've swapped out members here and there. And after that, I joined a YouTube channel a number of years ago that was dedicated to testing just a plethora of systems, and so I
Hmm.
got a lot of experience hanging out with game devs there and or talking to and play testing various like systems I'd never even heard before. That really expanded kind of my horizons, and that's where I met my partner, who I'm now married to, and we've just kind of kept playing together. We left that YouTube group a while ago, but we're still enjoying kind of playing various systems with one another. And now I'm making systems, which is wild.
Yeah, and we'll get on to the systems, one of the systems you created, all the witches, just shortly. But a couple of questions that have sort of cropped up as you've gone through that sort of retelling of your TTRPG experiences and journeys. Going from the player side of the screen to the GM DM side of the screen. What was that experience like for you?
It's hazy. I don't remember the beginnings too much. I dabbled with GMing in college, where to give our normal GM a break,
Hmm.
after we had been playing for like a semester, I suggested, what if I try DMing and then we can like swap campaigns every week?
Hmm.
And so we did that. And I think I learned a lot about improv back then and kind of thinking on the fly, because our sessions tended to be anywhere from 12 to 14 hours and like every
Wow.
Saturday. And so that's not something as a GM you can really prepare for fully. So I really kind of just would do my best to think of where the story might go and
Hmm.
then mentally kind of prepare various routes from there. And then, as many people know, jumping into games, actually players tend to do things you never even imagined. So
It's so
I
true.
got really good at the move of like, hey, I need to use the bathroom really quick, and then just sit in the bathroom for 5 to 10 minutes thinking, okay, what's going to happen? Um, but so that was a great kind of jump into the deep end,
Hmm.
like, experience as a GM. But I had it with a bunch of really close friends of mine, and so it was a really comfortable experience. Everybody was very understanding I was a new GM when I did make mistakes,
Hmm.
which I'm sure were plentiful. And ever since, I've kind of fallen into like forever GM territory in a lot of ways that I'm now trying to get out of. But developing a system, you're kind of forced to like GM your system a lot.
Hmm.
So I'm having to keep GMing right now.
All right. And you mentioned sort of trying a plethora of other systems. Um, and this sort of will segue into all the witches and things like that. Of the systems you play, which style of systems did you enjoy playing? Any standout ones, and have any of those sort of systems sort of stuck with you enough to maybe influence you as we move into all the witches?
Yeah. So I really like systems that use dice in interesting ways. And one of my favorite things that I get to do as a game designer is come up with new ways to use dice or other kind of things,
Hmm.
to help people play the game. So I really loved like the way Kids on Bikes kind of assigns different dice to like each attribute was
Hmm.
just something wholly new to me when I first played Kids on Bikes, and I loved it. And let's see, what are some other like systems that I really love how they use dice? I have there's a smaller kind of TTRPG that's very high fantasy, and very dark, that a friend of mine made, called Demon Gate, and it's a D20 system, but like every basically attack is contested, and so you roll for attack, the other person rolls for defense, and it makes
Hmm.
it like combat's very dynamic and engaging. And just the way that rolling for defense when you're also rolling for attack kind of set up very tense situations and really brought a lot of intensity to combats and
Hmm.
various other kind of social situations, um, really made me reevaluate just having dice be a attack mechanic. um, and yeah, I don't know. There's a lot that kind of influenced me here or there, but yeah, any system with like a unique dice mechanic or playing mechanic is
Hmm.
great in my book, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so sort of having had these experiences with these systems, a few of which we've mentioned there, where did your interest with these systems then turn into game design? When did you sort of flip the switch and really start to get under the hood or peek behind the curtain or whichever metaphor or sort of build up into the game designer you are now? How did that occur?
Great question. So, um, in the as I started testing out new systems and meeting other game designers, one thing that I could not comprehend was where they got their creative drive to write hundreds of pages of rules came from.
Hmm.
Um, to me, I struggle with kind of mental health and really finding motivation to do things sometimes. And especially back then, I was a couple years out of college and I was still really burnt out from the experience. And so I'd have conversations with them asking how what creatively drives you to look at the systems that exist out there now and say those aren't quite what I'm going for. So I'm going to write like all of these rules and like test this system for like years and years. Cuz I couldn't comprehend.
Okay.
But they had really great answers and they talked to me about it and we had a lot of really long conversations. And then a very nerdy thing happened where growing up, where we were talking earlier about me as like the youngest sibling kind of following the interests of my older siblings,
Yeah.
one of the things that we all really loved growing up were JRPGs, Japanese role-playing games.
Hmm.
And a couple years back, a trailer was released for Final Fantasy 16. It was like the first announcement trailer. I always really loved the Final Fantasy series, and I got incredibly excited, and I had nowhere to put all this excited energy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I want to run like a Final Fantasy TTRPG game. So I started looking around, seeing if there were any like fan Final Fantasy TTRPG games, and there were a few, but they didn't really do like what I was wanting them to do.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so I decided to make my own, and I ended up kind of taking that creative energy that I had and that excitement, and I wrote about 120 pages of a Final Fantasy TTRPG. I play tested it with some friends for about 3 or 4 months,
Hmm.
and from there, I realized that some adjustments needed to be made to balance the game and various other rules and things I wanted to like completely get rid of and like replace with other stuff. And as I was looking at doing that, it seemed like a very huge task for a project that I would not be able to like release or kind of make any money from or
Yeah.
anything like that. So I decided if I'm going to put this much effort into something, why don't I do something original so that I can get kind of financial help from like a Kickstarter or something so I can really put a lot of effort into the art and like the
Hmm.
world and all of this other stuff and make something for people to enjoy. And that kind of led to All the Witches.
Nice. So, all the witches. Before we go into all the witches, and I promise we'll get there in just a moment. Where can we find all the witches? Where can we find yourself? Where can we find all the things you're involved with? Please, Emma.
Yeah. So all the witches you can find information about at twitter.com/all allthewitches underscore. There's also an Instagram and a Hive account for all the witches that don't really have many posts on there. Twitter's kind of like the central hub for the project right now
Hmm.
because I can only focus on one thing at a time. Um, and then for me personally, you can find me anywhere I have an account at Emma Panada. It's like M Panada, but with my name kind of shoved in there as a joke. And other things I'm involved in, I'll there are announcements that'll happen in the future that I can't really do yet, but um I am a host of a horror podcast with some friends. So if you like horror movies and things, you can find us at Casual Horror Pod, or if you look up um, Casual Obsession on like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you'll be able to find us.
All right. Well, I will make sure there are links down in the description below this podcast. So please scroll down, support Emma, support all the witches. The Kickstarter, which at time of recording is waiting to be released. I'm sure by the time, well, we'll get more information on the Kickstarter shortly. What we're here to talk about, and the whole reason the Kickstarter exists, is all the witches. Emma, please give us a almost a sales pitch. Really draw us in and immerse us into what myself and other people are going to be investing in, both our time and some finance to sort of bring all the witches to life.
Yeah, so All the Witches is a original TTRPG with some deck building mechanics, where we're exploring kind of the diversity of witches in a fantasy setting. Um, Throughout history, witches have been portrayed as very like evil people that are doing like terrible things to community, stealing children, whatever. But especially more recently, witches have been begun to be portrayed in a much more positive light. And so, especially in the face of other kind of IPs being rude towards like the queer communities,
Mm.
um, I wanted to create a witch TTRPG that people could take, really make their own, and kind of create their own like stories with. So, in All the Witches, we're taking this one archetype and fully kind of fleshing it out and realizing it in a system. There are 10 schools of magic that you can learn spells and abilities from. There are three heritages that you can play as. You have humans, spirits, and celesti, which celesti are the children of humans and spirits. And there is discordance, which is this worldwide magic of corruption that kind of breaks apart communities, causes people to turn against one each other, corrupts environments, creates monsters,
Mm.
and a witch's kind of primary sacred duty for the world is to go around combating the effects of discordance using magic and helping people to overcome discordance who have been affected by it. But recently in the world, um, magical schools have begun to be established, and kind of the teaching of magic is reaching much broader subjects. And so this is kind of changing the world in positive ways and maybe also some negative ways. And
Mm.
so you're getting to explore this world that is changing and seeing all the ways that magic is kind of affecting the various regions that you'll find yourselves in. And it should be a very fun time.
Yeah, no, it sounds it, and I mean, 10 schools of magic. That's such a broad spectrum. Wasn't quite where I was going to take that, but I will because it covers a full array. I think it is what's mentioned in the Kickstarter, an array of schools of magic. So are our witches on this journey alone? Are they sort of left to their own devices? How does play develop and sort of the social aspect of the game sort of build out from the core mechanics?
Absolutely. So, like a lot of other TTRPGs, in All the Witches, you'll be in a party of anywhere from like 2 to 7 players, you could do, I guess. Um, and all of you will be part of a coven of witches, or you'll be part of a magical school. And you'll be kind of in this community working with your party to go out and help the world. Or you could be witches from a magical school that don't really kind of adhere to this duty to fight discordance, and maybe you're going out and doing all these other things. One
Mm.
of our regions is about a nation of pirate witches. Maybe you're sailing the high seas and kind of using magic to like plunder and kind of take treasure, or like find the mysterious parts of the world. And I think a really fun kind of system that I'm hoping to develop with this is really having players be involved in creating the traditions of their covens and their magical schools.
Mm.
Since magical schools themselves are a very new concept in the world, players are going to get the opportunity to help shape kind of the culture of their school, to help recruit students and teachers, to help really build their schools up, to create kind of or choose the different like rooms and additions that'll be added to your schools. Um, and also, I'm creating a entire magical sport called Rindarost. And
Wow.
if you want to play Rindarost, it's going to be a very fully fleshed out sport. And I talked about it on another podcast recently, and they were like, "That sounds like if you wanted, you could just have an entire campaign where you're playing through that sport." And I'm like, "Yeah, you absolutely could." And I think that's a really fun thing to just give players the option to kind of do what they want in this magical world.
Renderost, just so I make sure I get the name right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it sounds really fun, and you can name drop the other podcasts. We're all about supporting people and other content creators, so we can give them a shout out if you want to.
Yeah, it was Inside the Table.
Nice. So check out Emma's interview on Inside the Table as well. But while you are here on Snyder's Return, uh, Renderost sport. So we've got sport, we've got community building, we've got heritage and culture creation within these magical schools that are new to the world. Or should you wish to go and be privateers almost, or pirates, as we mentioned, that is an option available to us. How do the game mechanics support these adventures? Are we restricted to certain dice with this system? Is it fully open? Does it mix and match dice, cards, tokens? How does the game play in that respect?
Yeah, so All the Witches uses the standard array of dice except for the D100. So you'll need the D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, and D20. The
Hmm.
D20 is a much rarer die than you'll use, but the others will be fairly common. And in All the Witches, the die that you roll represents the difficulty of the check. And your goal is to take the die that you roll and roll underneath kind of your corresponding attribute that relates to the check you're making. So
Hmm.
if you're trying to sneak around a town, your GM might say, okay, that's like an agility check. And so if your agility is rank 3, then you'll take the die that the GM tells you to use. We'll say in this case it's a d6. You'll roll a d6, and if you roll a 3 or under, you succeed. If you roll 4 or over, you fail. Um, as you play the game, you'll be able to continue training your attributes and raising their rank. So one day you may have a agility rank that's 6, and if your GM tells you, "Okay, you're doing this sneaking check, go ahead and roll a d6." You can say, "Oh, I'm rank 6 at this already,
Hmm.
so I automatically pass." I think kind of the idea of allowing your characters to be really good at things is a fun concept. And one of the saddest kind of things that happen in some other games, like we'll say D&D for instance,
Hmm.
is you have a character with a plus 12 like history check modifier, and you roll a 1, and then it kind of turns into this big comedic moment of like, oh, your character is like really dumb and like doesn't know about this thing,
Yeah.
which is sad. So I really like the idea of having check marks where your character can automatically accomplish certain levels of tasks. And one thing that I really wanted to do to make the system more unique was to add a building mechanic in the game. And it was really hard to find a way to balance it. I went through a lot of different iterations trying to figure out how best to include a deck building system into a TTRPG.
Hmm.
Um, there's a way that you could do it where each card represents a different spell, and you kind of don't have full control of what spells that you have at any time. But that wasn't what I wanted to do with this system, and it felt
Okay.
way too limiting.
Hmm.
So there was a period where for a few months I wasn't really advertising that it had a deck building element to it, because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to figure it out. But then a couple months ago, I finally found a way that I liked that didn't feel too limiting, that I felt also added to kind of the narrative of the game and the different elements of the game. And basically, it's as a player, you'll use either the minor arcana of a tarot deck or you'll use the numbered cards of a playing card deck. And you'll build kind of a smaller deck for your character from those cards. And as you play, you'll add more cards to your deck. And basically, what they represent is as you go into either a social counter or like a combat encounter, you'll
Hmm.
draw 3 cards, and the numbers on those cards represent the number of actions you get that turn. So when it's your turn, you'll play one of the cards in your hand. If it's kind of like a 3 of diamonds or something, it means you have 3 actions that turn.
Hmm.
And you can use actions to move additional steps past kind of your passive movement. You can use it to cast spells or attack enemies or do any number of things. But the cards in your deck also determine how many spells you can prepare each day, and the suits of the deck determine something special that I don't want to get too far into right now because I'm
Okay.
still developing right now. But they've come into play in certain challenges for the game as well in really cool and interesting ways, I think.
Yeah, well, look forward to seeing how that is fully implemented when the game's released. And speaking of release, when is the Kickstarter going live? There's a sort of a holding page, a bookmarked page up on Kickstarter for a now upcoming project, yeah, approaching or over 800, approaching 900 people sort of eagerly anticipating it. I'm sure there'll be many more as sort of the hype and the Kickstarter begins. So when can we expect that to sort of kick off and allow us to support the project?
Yeah, so it'll be going live on Kickstarter March 16th. So only a few weeks away, which is, as anybody who's run a Kickstarter for their first few projects can tell you, very stressful. But there's been a lot of interest in the project. There's
Hmm.
been way more interest than I ever expected. Um, and that's a really amazing thing to see. And I'm really excited to have everybody kind of support and then deliver them this kind of project that I've been working on. And I hope people will enjoy a lot.
Yeah, and you mentioned support, and part of the support on the project, which you are the lead for, you have your co-host from the Casual Horror Pod, Nina. You have some amazing world-building talent. It has to be said, Austin Taylor, D'Angelo, Lynn Mayer, uh, who I'll put links to them for their Twitters because they are phenomenal each in their own right as content creators. Um, Nala Wu for art direction and things like that. So, what has it been like, sort of bringing together this team and seeing the product sort of move closer to fruition, as you mentioned before, the Kickstarter sort of kicking off mid March?
hmm it's been really amazing. I So January of 2022, I put out kind of a call saying, "Hey, I'm making the system. I need help. Please apply and help me make this project."
Hmm.
And I had a number of really amazing TTRPG talent that applied, and I didn't know the depths of their talent. Say, Austin, D'Angelo, and Lynn being kind of among those, where I
Hmm.
hired them and I saw they had like really amazing resumes, and I had known D'Angelo previously, but I didn't know the full extent of just how amazing they are,
Hmm.
and they absolutely are amazing. Um, I've worked with them throughout the last year just to kind of help put their ideas together so that we can kind of pitch it in the Kickstarter. I've had to take things slow. I live in one of the most expensive cities in America, and I have a good job and I make decent money, but a lot of that goes towards rent and living
Hmm.
expenses. So as the months have gone on, I'll kind of spend anywhere from like $400 to $600 a month, um, having the writers help me with certain things or having artists work on different pieces. And we've just been taking things really, really slowly. And that's kind of the goal of the Kickstarter is so we'll be able to raise enough money where I can just say, okay, everybody, let's get to work and get things moving.
Mm.
Um, because if we didn't have that, this would probably take a few more years to make with the rate it's going. But it's been wonderful to work with everybody. A lot of people have been kind of on standby, waiting for the Kickstarter funds to start for me to really be able to get them to start working.
Hmm.
Nalawu being one of the ones that I've been able to work with little bits. Our contract stated that they would mainly start working after the Kickstarter, but they did help me with the new cover illustration that I kind of showed off last month.
Mm.
And then they've also been helping me on these 3 landscape pieces that I'm getting from Trixie Wizard. Um, and they've been amazing. And I really appreciate just all of their art advice and feedback they can give to people, because I don't know if you experience this, but when I commission somebody for art and they send me like sketches
Mm.
or the finished project, I'm one of the people that's just like, this looks amazing. I love it. Thank you so much. You're wonderful. And I never have like feedback to give. So having somebody who's incredibly artistic and knowledgeable be able to say, "Oh, this looks amazing, but let's kind of fix this thing or alter this thing," has been really, really helpful for me to have.
Yeah, we've been lucky enough to commission a couple of artists for a few different bits and pieces, and it's always so incredible what they're able to achieve with just a notion, a couple of words, a suggestion, and as you say, well, there's no feedback. There's always that positive feedback because we're so blown away as with the illustrations and the artwork for all the witches as shown on through your Twitter feed and on the Kickstarter page. It looks phenomenal, really engaging, and really exciting to sort of get involved with. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. With respect to uh, the time it's taken and things like that, you mentioned earlier a little bit towards mental health. Are you able to take downtime? Are you able to sort of have some time for yourself, or are you very much work at location A, then come back and Kickstarter slash all the witches, or do you get a bit of time for yourself?
I My mental health is such that um if I do not have the energy to be able to work on something, my brain will just not work and I won't be able to work on it. So I kind of am forced to take that time,
Hmm.
which is good because then I'm not like pushing myself too much, but it's bad because part of me is like, I wish I could push myself a little bit more, um, just so I could get certain things moving. Or um, there was a period of time where my mental health was just really bad, so I ended up not kind of working on the project for about a month and a half, like actively.
Yeah.
Um, and that was really challenging, because largely speaking, for the past year, I'm the one doing kind of all the work and putting things together. Um, and so if I'm not working, then nothing's happening. And
Gotcha.
I feel really guilty about it. And
Hmm.
that kind of feeds into the negative mental health. But um, this next month is probably the busiest I've been in a while. And I'm doing what I can to manage my mental health as best as I can. But this is definitely a time where I'm trying to like push myself because I want to make sure the Kickstarter page is as cool and ready as it can be, for when people kind of look at it and they see this amazing project and
Hmm.
they want to back it. Because of all the attention we've received, it's just made me want to push even more to make sure that especially the Kickstarter page kind of lives up to people's expectations and gets them even more excited than they already were.
Yeah, of course. And not content with sort of full time work and running Kickstarter game development for all the witches. The casual horror podcast. How did that start, and what was the sort of the genius behind that, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't know about genius. So, um, like many people, during the pandemic, you want to find ways to be able to still stay engaged with your friends and talk to your friends. And my co-hosts on that podcast, Noah, Nina, and Jeff, are people I've known for multiple years at this
Mm.
point, and Nina especially is one of my oldest friends right now. And so as the pandemic was happening, all of them were really into horror movies and various horror media, and I had spent my entire life avoiding it, thinking I would be terrified. So they posted on Twitter at one point. Noah was already doing one podcast,
Mm.
um, and he said, I would love to do another just horror movie podcast where I can talk to my friends about all my thoughts on these horror movies, but I just don't have the time. And so I was like, well, if you want to do this, I can edit it. And I've never watched horror anything in my life before, so I can be the classic kind of like scared of everything person because I've never watched this stuff.
Yeah.
And they were all like, heck yeah. So we gathered together, started recording, and then turns out I'm desensitized to basically all scary things already. And so didn't really quite fill in my role for the podcast, but it's still just it's a fun time of us friends hanging out. And we have some close friends who like will listen and will engage with us about like what we say.
Yeah.
And I think more than anything, it's just an excuse for us to be able to hang out and talk like every couple of weeks. And it's just a really fun time.
No, yeah, no, it sounds great, and I'll make sure there's we'll recap links in a little while. Um, so Emma, we've talked about your introduction to TTRPGs and your sort of progression through from player to DM, GM, and then through into game designing, and now the Kickstarter and the all the Witches development. Um, where do you, as Emma Panada and all the Witches, where do you go next? What's in the future for you beyond this current project?
Yeah, so there are 3 projects that I really want to be able to give to the TTRPG community and to make for everybody. All the Witches is the first. I'm starting we've kind of started work on the second one, um, and we're, like, really kind of going into higher gear working on it this week, and the third one is very far away, but,
Fair enough.
um yeah. I don't wanna say too much about things. If you look through our my kind of Twitter feed on All the Witches, if you look back far enough, you'll see the 3 that I said I wanted to make. The first one was All the Witches, the second one was a Pokemon/Digimon style
Nice.
TTRPG, and the third one is, um like a mecha TTRPG.
Mm,
And both of those other ideas have evolved a lot since then. For the Pokemon style RPG or TTRPG, when I posted about that, some good friends of mine, Trixie Wizard, messaged me and they were like, please, it's been our dream to like be involved in a project on this. And they're
yeah.
both incredible artists. And I think one of the things that really stops um, kind of monster collection TTRPGs from being made is just the need for so many art assets.
Yeah.
But with these incredible artists wanting to work with me already, and the way we're doing like payment and stuff
Mm,
is that we each have kind of equal ownership of the project. Um, and we've come up with some really amazing ideas for what we want to do with the world and how everything will work. And I'm really excited to announce more. I think people really like it, but I can't announce anything right now.
that's fair enough. This guy likes it, and I was gonna go past it, but can't wait to see how the Pokemon/Digimon TTRPG evolves to steal from that particular sort of franchise. And of course, mechs and mecha is always an exciting sort of genre of game. So
It's a hard genre.
yeah,
One of my biggest challenges with that one is if you look at artists with commissions open and things,
Hmm.
a lot of times artists will have sections that say things I don't do.
Yeah.
And a lot of sometimes it'll be like not safe for work, some of it will be like furry art, but almost every artist has like mecha on
Yeah.
there.
No
And so
mecha.
finding a mecha artist to be able to draw numerous pieces for a
Hmm.
TTRPG is going to be really difficult. But I've got some fun ideas, and I think it could be really cool if I can find kind of an artist to work with on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Best of luck, because I can't wait to see how it develops in that respect. Well, speaking of, or moving on from things you can't quite talk about to things or where we can find you soon. Uh, All the Witches. Are there any stream games, any sort of one shots, or any sort of shows you've got or appearing on, or the system is appearing on that we can maybe sort of watch video on demand or anything like that coming up?
Yeah, so we have a couple things going on slash that have gone on. We had a one shot run by me um, at the end of last month where we did kind of a crossover with the Kickstarter that was happening from Mage Hand Press called Witchy Cakes. It's like a witchy like cake building card game. It's really competitive and fun.
Hmm.
And to help promote their Kickstarter, they made a 5e like tie-in adventure for the game.
Okay.
And so some of the people working on that Kickstarter are good friends of mine. And I decided, me and my partner both were like, what if we ran this adventure to help promote their Kickstarter? And I was
Yeah.
like, well, it's a witchy project already. What if I just adapted it to All the Witches and it became kind of like this crossover thing? So that's what we did. And we ran it. It was a lot of fun. You can see the VOD for that is up on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/slash Emma Panada. Um, and you can watch the VOD there. If that's not your thing, um, in March and April, we have 3 different streams happening. One is going to be on twitch.tv/slash Stella Luna's channel. Stella's a really incredible creator in the
Hmm.
space, really great at uplifting kind of marginalized voices, and especially for the Asian community, kind of getting all Asian streams together. And they've been a really good friend of mine and like incredibly supportive of me and my efforts. And they'll be running a one shot on the day after the Kickstarter goes live. So it'll be March 17th at 8 Eastern.
Hmm.
And there's currently, I don't know when this goes live, but we're currently accepting applications for players who want to play in that. And then also there will be a two shot GM'd by me happening on Bad House RPG's Twitch channel. And those happen April 3rd and 10th. And so we've got a few things going on. Should be a fun time. It'll be a great opportunity to just kind of see how All the Witches is played and some of the stuff you can do with it. And yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to help people find yourself and all the wishes, where can we find you and all the things you're associated with, please, Emma?
Yeah. So for my personal stuff, you can find me on twitter.com/slash Emma Panada. I also stream sometimes at twitch.tv/slash Emma Panada. You can find the horror movie podcast at Casual Obsession on like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you can find our Twitter at Casual Horror Pod on Twitter. Um, and then for All the Witches, you can find us at All the Witches _ on Twitter. All the Witches itself as a handle was taken by like some Taylor Swift fans, and their account is privated and locked, and so I can't ask them, "Hey, can I please have that handle?" Um, but yeah, you can find us there, and we're gonna have a lot of really cool announcements happening soon. So please be sure to check us out.
All right. Well, I will make sure links are down in the description below this podcast. Please scroll down, follow those links, support Emma, support all the witches. Check out the Kickstarter when it goes live in the middle of March. If you listen to this after and it's been sort of fully funded, because it will be fully funded,
Thank you.
then follow the links. I will replace the links so it can be found. Where are we expecting to be able to find it, like Drive Through RPG or itch.io or? where will be the storefront for this once it's funded and released?
I'll probably have it on drive through and potentially itch. I've got to look into like where to put it natively to
Yeah,
sell and kind of the benefits of each site. My like mind is focused elsewhere right now,
fair enough.
but we
Wherever,
will
yeah,
have it up. Yeah, you
wherever
will
it's
be able to
available for
find it.
sale, there will be a link to find it for sale. So please scroll down and check and follow those links and support this amazing game. Uh, Emma, we've covered even more. I did a recap, and now we've covered even more. Is there anything at this point of of our chat of the interview that you want to bring up that we haven't mentioned so far?
One thing that I really like to mention with All the Witches um, is I one thing I'm really passionate about with this project is just making it very as accessible as possible. And so to do that, All the Witches is going to be a digital only product. Um, I'm sure if we put it on up on drive through, you may be able to like order hard copy versions of it there.
Hmm.
But for the Kickstarter, it's digital only because for smaller Kickstarters like ours, generally about a third of what you raise ends up going to printing and kind of all the fees associated with that.
Yeah.
And in the past few years with COVID and everything else going on, if you weren't aware, there was a large paper shortage that we're still kind of recovering from slash in the middle of, um, which tends to delay a lot of Kickstarters because it's really hard to find people to print your books in a
Hmm.
timely fashion. So um, we're not going to mess with that. Instead, we're just doing a wholly digital kind of product and to show the benefits of doing wholly digital Kickstarters, we're really going all in where the money that would have been used for printing, we're going to be using it to kind of, for one, having a really great, fully realized and detailed PDF that's searchable. We're going to be hiring a content creator to make short videos, just explaining different parts of the book so that if you're not somebody who learns well just from reading rules, you
Hmm.
can scan like a QR code or just click on a link and it'll pop up like a high produced video of somebody kind of explaining these rules really concisely. There'll be various kind of music pieces commissioned that you can use in your games. There's going to be a lot of portraits of characters that you can use as NPCs or your characters that'll come with the release.
Hmm.
Um, and so much more. I'd also really love to have a website or some sort of accessibility tool that helps people make and manage their characters. One thing that really helped kind of illuminate this was when the D&D Beyond kind of boycott was happening like a month ago.
Hmm.
A lot of people started speaking up of like, I want to participate in this, but D&D Beyond is like the only accessibility tool that really helps me to understand a system and like keep track of everything I need to keep track of. And people were really calling for other companies to build like similar tools for their projects.
Yeah.
And so that's something I'm really wanting to try to do. And there's a number of other accessibility features that we're wanting to accomplish. And some of it depends on how much we're able to raise. Um, but we're wanting to show how much you can do with a digital release if you're not worried about printing and how much you can really give to the consumer
Yeah.
with all of that money that's kind of going directly into your project.
Yeah. It sounds amazing. Amazing. An astounding sort of cross section of tools available there that I can't wait to see come to fruition on completion of the Kickstarter and on into the future. And speaking of the future, Emma, I'd love to get you back on the show um, to see one how All the Witches is developed in the future, how your other projects are coming on, or when they are up for either crowdfunding or release or anything like that. If you'd be willing to come back and join me, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is great. I'd love to.
All right. Well, we will arrange that separately outside of this chat. But yeah, it's been such a pleasure to get to chat with you, learn all about all the witches and all the sort of the good stuff that you're doing and associate with. So thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the show, then go to www.snydersreturn.squarespace.com. Alternatively, you can find us over on Twitter @ReturnSnyder. We have a Linktree link in the description of this episode. And if you want to support us, come and join us over on Patreon. And we also have a Discord server. Please leave us a review because we'd love to learn how to improve the channel and provide better content out for those who are listening. Until we speak again, thank you.